Hi everyone and welcome along to sonicacademy.com with me, Chris. Today we're joined by somebody that I'm very much looking forward to, just purely for the fact that he's been in the business longer than me, and it's rarely that I get to talk to somebody like that. Today we're joined from a studio in France by Nick Bracegirdle from Chicane. Hi Nick, are you there?
I'm good, my friend.
How are you?
I've only been doing it just a little bit longer than you.
Well, I'm probably about 12 months, but do you know what? I'm going to take it and run with it. Is that okay?
Okay.
uh, Nick, it's we have known each other, for I don't know, 14 years.
Mm.
We were label mates back in the day,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
our paths crossed, and we didn't sort of cross for a long time until last year. We did a date together in Belfast. It was really great to catch up. So, let's go back and chat about sort of where it all started from you. Grew up just outside London.
Yeah, yeah. I grew up in a little village in Buckinghamshire, 15, 20 minutes from Heathrow, and leafy part of the world. Yeah, it was nice. And
And
went to,
and did you do music at a young age? Were you sent to piano lessons, or was it
oh,
school
yeah.
or
Oh,
orchestra?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was classically tutored in guitar and piano and horrendously in violin. And yeah, up to a certain point, but I was dyslexic and I couldn't sight read. So,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like a chore for me. There, it wasn't. I wasn't. That wasn't. Music. That was just like yawn.
Mm-hmm. And did that not? I mean, most kids get put off at that stage, when they're going over scales and stuff, and they're just like, oh, I have to do this. There's nothing interesting. There's nothing, no affinity. What made you keep going and then move into sort of electronic world?
Um, I, I was on holiday in the Isle of Wight and I ran past a tent playing Jean-Michel Jarre out of it, and I stopped in my tracks and went, "What is that?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? What is that sound?" I think Uh, crikey, I don't know how old I was. I must have been pretty young. I must have been maybe 8 or 9,
Mm-hmm.
and everything before that was just guitar-based music or just songs, and it just anyway. This sound came out, and I got immersed in early synth culture, Vangelis, and all that sort of thing, and would save up to buy my first keyboards, and from that point onwards, really, from the age properly from the age of about maybe 11 or so to no, 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 24, 25, when I broke through. So I spent like a decade or so in my over a decade in my bedroom, just honing my craft and
Mm-hmm.
just understanding music and kind of doing it, while everything else was going on. That was always happening in the background.
What sort of equipment would you have had back in those days? Was it literally a Yamaha keyboard, or was there an Atari attached to it, or what?
The early days, my very first little setup was totally bing bong. It was It was nuts. I had a Boss Doctor Rhythm drum machine, which I could run an accent out into the CV of a little SH-101. So the beats and the bass were synced up, and I had some gnarly old Yamaha multi sort of keyboard,
Mm-hmm.
and was running things into a tape deck, and then I'd record something, and then it was a double tape deck, and then we'd bounce to the other one while that was playing and place the bits on top. It was absolutely gash.
Yeah, but I bet you still created some really interesting things. I mean, I still have under my stairs a box full of old cassette tapes from. I had a PSSR 70 Yamaha keyboard that,
Yeah, I
you,
won them.
and you had the drum pads, and I would just make tracks, and I thought, geez, are these going to go to number one at the time? But they're lovely days.
Yeah, they're very interesting. I mean, for me, actually, I was incredibly frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
very, very frustrated. I couldn't get. Oh God! Actually, one of my main sort of gripes about those days, and actually moving forward quite well on, is a frustration of never really being able to get what I wanted. I always had a saying was, you have what you want and you get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's taken so long to program this ruddy thing, and get that. The time it took to interface through all that you lost a little bit of impetus and what you did, and I was always just a little bit frustrated, and I'm a much better writer than I am engineer, shall we say. So it was a little bit carnage in the studio, you know. Yeah, that was kind of interesting. So the studio setup grew into bits. I mean, my first top 40 record was recorded on a BX16. It's just a line mixer with bass and treble. That's it, and some gains, and that was it.
And what was that record?
That was actually under the Disco Citizens moniker, which was a track called Right Here, Right Now.
Yes.
And it went top 40. And that's a great moment. But I remember thinking, crikey.
and did you know at that stage when you'd made Right Here, Right Now, did you know this is a chart hit, or were you still a young guy that was, finding his feet?
I was working with various DJs and people, and because as I say, I grew up on this diet of Jean-Michel Jarre and Vangelis, and also I also grew up on a diet of Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Right.
Same thing. It's a wildly different thing, but all very strongly melody driven. And then I kind of got shanghaied into dance music, and I haven't made it back since. And yeah, to answer your question, it was a really good tune. We at that point it was quite, club music and dance music was really it was a real hotbed. So we borrowed and stole a list of people to mail the record to, from Tommy to you name it, and that's what happened, and that's how it started. It got picked up by Deconstruction Records. James Barton, who was my A&R, who founded and formed Cream, and off it went. It was kind of a bit of a roller coaster.
And what age are you at this point?
I am. The year is something like 95.
95, yeah.
So I don't know. I'm about 25 or something like that. Right. Yeah, something like that, 24, 25.
Nick, you should have shaved off a few years there. You should say, I was 18, 19, Moving on, I remember the next single, I think was it Footprint, was the next Disco Citizens? Was that after?
Disco Citizens, yes, I think it possibly was actually. That was in and around the Robert Miles era, because I think I was influenced by that at the time. It was an okay record. It wasn't one of my best, I don't think. But it was very quickly after that, Chicane was formed.
And how did you go from? Why did you go from Disco Citizens to Chicane, and what was the transition? What was the thought process?
Chicane was actually I wrote and produced offshore with a college friend of mine called Leo Elstop, and we did Disco Citizens together as well. It was a totally different. The Disco Citizens was a housey, dancey project, and Chicane, and the original Offshore and stuff was a down tempo, more
cinematic. It was very filmic.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I take through, or try to use as a description for what I do, is a widescreen approach to dance music, really.
I've told this story loads of times. I distinctly remember myself and another guy, Richard Rainey, were working in a studio, learning our craft, and we were trying to make dance music, and we had a Cubase, and we had a S1000, and we were driving home on a Friday night from the studio at around 6:30. It was a rainy night, and Pete Tong mentioned he was going to play this record. It was a really amazing record, and we had to pull the car over, and we sat and listened to every note. It blew us. It literally blew us. We thought we were making great headway in the studio, and we were sounding great, and then Offshore came on the radio, and it was just like, crap, this is amazing. And it just, it literally blew us away. And then I think a week or two later, I was in a club in Belfast, and at the end of the night, the last track, the House Lights, came on, and Offshore came on, and it was just incredible. How did you feel at that time?
Offshore is it's an interesting record, because it's it's a sad record actually. It's about it's kind of it's psychologically and kind of spiritually about being the last kid left on the beach, which is what I was, because my parents are both university lecturers, and I used to spend 6 7 weeks on the beach. I'd surf and stuff, and I had mates that would come for 2 weeks, and another set of mates, and it's
Right.
like that. It's that feeling you get when summer is slipping away and it's slipping through your fingers, and it's slightly sad. You're heading into autumn. It's like the end. It's like the end of something, and it has a melancholy angle to it, and I was lucky enough at that point. I don't really know quite how I managed it at that point to articulate that into a piece of music, because it's not easy. I'm much better at doing that now, as I've been doing it for 20 years. I know how to do it, and the process, and I think I was fortunate to find a couple of great sonics and sounds which were able to convey that emotion, and it's one thing I harp on about a lot to people, and or if I'm doing a demo doctor with someone or doing an interview, it is I don't really understand unemotive music. Music is meant to make you feel a certain way, and that's one of the things that I really desperately try and squeeze into a piece. And I think Offshore was probably the first time I managed to achieve that.
Well, let's get down to some specifics about Offshore. The guitar-y pluck that was sort of the main theme of the track. I read somewhere, somebody was asking on some forum somewhere, where did that come from? Can you remember?
Yes, I do.
And where is it from?
I'm not telling you.
Okay. Okay, that's the end of this interview then.
I don't know what, trying to get the crown jewels from the monkey.
Well, I tell you, hold on. We did an interview with Charlie May. We went over to his studio, and he was going to tell us how he created the expander and how it would happen. And we totally got into the car, back to the airport, and I went, "Oh crap! I totally forgot to ask him that question." So you won't reveal where you got the guitar?
It's very, very obvious.
Right.
Far more obvious. But this is and this is no word of a lie. Because I've had to revisit it for various things over the years. I've got it back, and I've got the sound back up. Same sound. Put it together and listened to it and went, "Doesn't sound right."
Right.
I don't know why. It's a well known Roland sound.
Okay.
And I don't know. I think actually that particular sound was very velocity dependent, and whatever I did when I recorded it for Offshore, I had it doing something. It's one of those sounds that when you hit it a bit too hard, it's super twangy. It goes horrible. But I have got about, I don't know whether it's the note length or the velocity, but I have the sound, and every time I sort of listen to it, I go,
don't know what it is.
No, it's close.
But there's something.
It's not close. It's the same ruddy sound, but I listen to it and go, "What was I doing there?" Because it just sounds different. Whether it's how the delay was working off it, or it's a peculiar thing, a moment in time. I don't know.
Okay, let's move on then to the big pads that we all tried to recreate. That big swell. Is it? It sounds to me like there's just a very simple sort of saw filtering up, but then there's this shimmer, this sort of it's almost like a sea wave at the top. Is that what's going on there?
That's complicated and is a recurring theme, obviously.
Yeah.
One of my trademark things.
Yeah.
It's when I do them, they're normally 5-6 layers of stuff. It's never one sound. It's complicated. There's a lot of noise in there. There's a lot. I won't say it's not white noise, but it's quite and they open up. So and get a bit brighter. They're very complex things, those sounds. Funnily enough, Steve Hellstrip sent me an email or something recently, about a year ago, and it's the theme tune to EastEnders slowed down 500 times.
Okay, right.
And it sounds like my pad sound.
It's just a big swell, the big
Yeah,
whoa.
it's one of those things when you take something and I often would sample things that were unusual, like the reverb or the end of a track with a string note holding or something that had you know, and it's all about creating an atmosphere and a sonic kind of thing, and that's how they were done. You know, it's not an easy thing. It's like it's a bit like when you go to a string ensemble and you want to play. You're looking for really real strings, but you don't play strings on the keyboard, and they never quite sound right.
Yeah.
And it's when you get a patch and you go, oh, fucking hell, that sounds really really chicane. Oh, it's really atmospheric. But when it's still one sound, unless it's really 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 clever and it's doing things, they don't sound that way.
And so do you keep going back to the same synths to create
No,
these, or is it always just a variation that look, I need this sort of filtered down saw pad, I need this sort of noise filtering happening, so you know the layers that you want, and do you go to different synths for those layers?
Yeah, I've made a point of trying to not. I think the first couple of albums I did use the same couple of things, and no, I've made a point of trying to develop the same thing, but do it with different things. You know.
Okay. Well, let's get bang up to date. Are you a hardware guy? Have you gone in the box? What's your current sort of setup at the moment? What synths have you got? What DAW do you use? And what's your favourite plugins? There's about 14 questions there.
Yes, thanks.
So let's start off. What DAW do you use first of all?
What DAW do you use? You're talking about DAW?
Yes, yeah. We call them DAWs.
I've got an 828 down there, Mark the Unicorn.
No, what do you use? Cubase or do you use?
You mean that? Oh.
Yeah.
What's GUI? What graphical user interface?
Well, we call them DAWs. The old Ari shape.
I am still using Logic Pro 9.
Right.
I haven't gone to the new one because I thought it looked a bit silly.
Do you know what, Nick? I've moved it immediately. It did look silly for a day or two, and then you get completely used to it. Yeah. And there are some really lovely new features in there. That's the arpeggiator is brilliant. I absolutely.
Oh really?
It's a new go-to thing for me. And there's new MIDI effects and stuff in there that are great.
Putting Melodyne in house was great as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's the simple fact is that I was just basically too paranoid to change, basically, and I've had so much work. We're just coming. The album's finished, and the album's finished. There's always something else to be done. Just to stop and go right,
clear out.
And also there's the new Macs which look like dustbins. When do we change up to those? It's just like, oh god. I can remember getting rid of the Mac with all the Pro Tools hardware and all that, which cost 15-20 grand, and now it's worth about 8p.
Yeah. No,
you don't even. Yeah.
And would you consider an iMac, a top, specking out an iMac, 27-inch, 5K, big, 32 gig of RAM, whatever, would that be an option?
Maybe. I mean, I'm still using. I've got an 8-core here, an older 8-core, but it's pretty pokey. It's pretty serious. Serious piece of kit.
I do all my stuff on a laptop. It's just.
Yeah. I mean, if you think back, if you think back to what we were using, good lord, my favourite was always with the Atari, where you'd save the song, and it'd save it. But then when you load it up again, it would say it was too damn big to load again, and you'd be like that. What?
Yeah. And were you ever Cubase, or I always thought you were Cubase? You're right, and you've moved to Logic. Is that right?
yeah. I was Cubase right up to the point where shall we say, they did Cubase Audio, which I started with, and they had the audio pool, which
Yeah.
which was exactly that. You sort of fished about and hoped you could find what you needed. That was the first attempt at that, which was built on some shaky. It was, they were trying to do, a good audio engine built on bad foundations, actually, which is why that kind of went wonky. And then I started working with Logic.
Yeah, no, it must have been. I was the same. I moved in 1999, and I had think 3 or 4 months on Logic, and wasn't getting it at all. And went back to Cubase and realized I'd completely forgotten Cubase as well, so I had to go back to Logic. and I've been Logic ever since. And even Ableton doesn't sit with me for some bizarre reason.
Me neither.
So hardware or software, where do you have lots of synths around you and into the mixing desk?
I had a room full of it. It's all gone.
Yeah,
more or less all gone. I've got my Roland S750, which did all the hits. A JP8000, a Nord lead, and a dirty great huge piano to play everything in weighted keys. That is it. Everything goes through a big knob.
Yep. Got one of those.
And that is it. And there's a mic and a Focusrite interface for banging things in. That is it. That is all there is in this room.
And do you prefer that sort of freedom? I mean, it sounds exactly the same setup as mine. I have a Mackie big knob, a computer, a JP8000, I have a Nord, and that's it. Do you prefer it?
Yeah, I do, mainly because I was discussing earlier was that had so many frustrations with synths and stuff, and there are obviously some stuff, and a lot of purists will complain about, well, that doesn't sound quite right. But I tell you what, there was a point, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, where the modelling became so good and so on the money.
Yeah.
But the number one thing which outweighs it is simply the automation. The things that you can now do, which you needed 20 people to even get close to doing stuff. That is the biggest thing. And so I mean I do a huge amount of automation, whether it's filters or bypassing things going into gates. It just that technology it is such a luxury, and I think that's one of the most important things that we have.
So let's get down to some synths that you use in the box. What do you use? ES2s, massives? What's your go-to synth?
Yeah, use those. Sorry, I've got it open here. I've got a ARP 2600, which is great.
The Arturia stuff, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, the Arturia stuff. Yeah, I've got quite a few of their bits. They're great.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to use that thing in real time.
Yeah.
That's really nice because it's really easy to detune oscillators and just get some really. So I use that a lot. All the regular stuff, but it's just do a lot of programming within the sounds. Yeah, I mean, everything is in the sounds, really, Chris. I mean, it's it's a bit like offshore. Some of that was a bit of a fluke, really, because when you try and recreate that it's a very simple riff with some chords modulating with some atmospheres on top of it, and you try and recreate that. Just if you did one over go, it sounds okay, but does it sound magical? Maybe not. And it's like, sometimes it's 50% of the time is spent just trying to make that sound magical, and exciting. And you couple that with some great writing, and that's when it happens,
And so sound design is obviously important to you. Do you sit and noodle and do you have a real good understanding of sound design, or are you just turn knobs and sort of?
I'm a complete anarchist. I'm an absolute nightmare. I will get something a bit close.
Yeah.
and I'll then send it to a man that saves my ass 20 times a day.
Okay.
I've worked with him for a long time. His name's Richard Searle.
Right.
Richard, I'll tell you who Richard used to be. Richard used to be the man that made Joey Negro sound good. He's the man that produced the Jakarta stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And had to recreate everything for American Dream, all that sort of gubbins.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant guy, and I've worked with him for a long period of time. So I'll get something maybe 90% there, and then he will fine tune it for me. So that's kind of how I work, and it's very important, as you know, to get out the song or get the writing bit in. So I sometimes I'll play something to someone and I'll go, well, that sounds terrible. I said, no, I know it sounds terrible. You got to look past that. Mm-hmm. That'll be fixed. So and I work more and more. I think a lot of happy accidents in the past. When you'd come in the studio and I wouldn't necessarily have a great idea, and you'd fiddle about and come up with something. I work much more now in my head. I write more have a much more specific mm-hmm. thing about than just going to the studio and hoping something's going to happen. I don't work that way anymore.
See, that's alien to me because I never have anything in my head. I never go into the studio with a clear picture. It's when I sit down and start just throwing things in and listening to things, and it's a waste of time. I wish I had in my head, right, this is what we're going to do, and just cut out all the bullshit of just noodling about. Do you hear melodies in your head? Do you have to get them down, or can you remember them? How does that process work? How do you start?
Yeah.
Do you have a blank page? Where's do you beats?
Some of the most amusing voice memos on this that you could possibly imagine.
Right.
I was out with the dog 2 days ago, and I'm working on a song, but I don't. I've discovered that I don't. A lot of the time now, I don't have to be in the studio. I'm running the melody. I'm doing it in my head. I've got a bit of Beethoven on the quiet, and it's kind of interesting. I'm just like you. I used to go in the studio and didn't have any ideas. I also started doing for the album. I did for a couple of things. I didn't have any ideas. I did like audio mood boards. So I'd get into iTunes and I like this and I like that. I like these drums. So I'd have that and it has to have bits of this and the bits of that. It's not. We weren't going to sample them. We weren't going to rip the writing, but some of them so I started doing these mood boards of how I wanted things to be. And that was kind of interesting. That's mostly a waste of time, actually, Chris.
So, how do you do your drum programming? Is it audio? Is it loops? Do you use AX24s? What's battery? What's your sort of? How do you approach that?
Bang loads of audio in, chop it up. I loved that when that feature, or if I just banged in some drums off a deep house record or something. I love that feature where you just drag it and it times it up. You chop it and drag it, and oh my good God! Can you remember?
Yes.
Remember the hell?
Yes.
The hell you used to have to go through
on Ack-Eyes and trying to get the correct. We had a BPM chart if we wanted to go up.
Right.
If we wanted to go up semitones and tuning. And the old like historically Logic's time stretching algorithms were a total mess. Like you would time stretch it and then have to go in, and I would go in at 30 seconds and sit and shift things about. It was horrible. What about effects? You're not swayed by the current sort of really heavily compressed side chaining stuff. You're still very much a dynamic producer and an old school producer. What advice do you give to the kids today?
The one thing I'm using, I shouldn't even be telling you this because it's just the most amazing thing. The best reverb on the market is Valhalla.
We use them a lot on our courses.
Oh my God!
I know.
The vintage verb and the shimmer. It's just like, oh.
Shimmer is just like,
It's like, oh, what the hell? Where's that come from? That's all. I tell you what that reminds me of. That reminds me of even back when, if you thought I sounded good, I'd listen to a record by BT and go,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, when Emma came out, it was just, again, we were in the studio and it was real. Yes, we're getting somewhere. It's like, oh Christ, this is,
mine sounds like plastic.
Yeah.
But back to your question, it is quite interesting where we're at with the kids, whether it's Martin Garrix or one of those guys. We're at a place now where it reminds me very much of a place where earlier on in our musical sort of history, where people worked out how to make these records. So we've got a period now where people have worked out how to make these records sound big, very, very big on a technical level. Big drops, massive sounding record, but with no, with no real heart or no real great melody. Now, that's that. We've got a lot of nosebleed EDM still floating about and all that. That's very interesting. So sonically and dynamically, in a festival, they're monstrous sounding things, and a lot of kids have now worked out how to do that. It's like a game. It's like let the dog see the rabbit, and I felt it was the same back with kind of sort of the Dreamhouse era, and people worked out how to a formula, and things became the sort of trancey thing, and things became so dull. But it got worked out. We'll get this big sorry Soothtown sound and some drums, so it's so important to stamp your own individuality upon this, but that's also in some ways now hard. It is hard to be different. It is hard to stick out. You're not one of the sheep. It's I have time for Joel Zimmerman, Deadmau5, because he does things his way, and I've always done things my way, and I sometimes do records which impossible to bloody mix together, for DJs, offshore being one of them. Can be some flack for that. I just it's become very difficult as well. Everyone's a ruddy DJ. Everyone thinks that they know the thing inside out, and it just isn't that way,
What strikes me is that, like, Martin Garrix is 17. At 17, I had an Atari and one or two bits of kit, and I was working away and I was doing as much as I could, but I didn't understand the whole mechanics of songwriting and stuff until I was 24, 25, and how, I just wonder how this kid has got it, and I'm sure there's a team of people, taking a small gem of an idea. I do agree with you that Deadmau5 is, if you listen sonically to his stuff, it's very much like yours. It's got weight, it's got dynamics, it's got breadth, it's got depth, and I mean I adore that guy. Chordally more than anything. I just think his chords are so brilliant, and I know you'll appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other thing is that Joel's actually doing it, opposed to. We won't mention names, but you and I know several of the top 10 DJs in the world. I don't think the vast majority of people realise that there is a backroom team of producers and people knocking a lot of these things out for them, and it gets given a stamp, and off it goes under that guise. It's a business. It's become like a production line, and it's embarrassing.
How do you feel? I mean, how do you feel about the whole ghost producing thing? Would you ever ghost produce for somebody?
Well, I have trouble ghost producing for myself. No, not really. I mean, I produce pop stuff for people in the past, but that's a different thing. It's a bit of a worry, someone like Martin Garrix. it's the Emperor's New Clothes. I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether that's going to last. I don't know whether you how it'll be interesting. Because if he suddenly starts coming out with stuff which clearly probably is emotionally he wouldn't be able to been there to have written this stuff. It'll be surefire that he's got a bunch of people behind him knocking it out in the studio, and Martin will come in and do a few bits, and let's hope he doesn't end up in hospital like Avicii.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely the X factor where there is a team of writers just submitting their tracks, and you go in and go, yep, that, and so it's changed a lot. How you've gone from me where we did big album campaigns and it was radio and it was we shot the £60,000 videos for Christ, but
I did an 81.
Exactly, you beat us, but how did you make peace with the internet? I know you had some troubles with albums being leaked and stuff. Have you made peace with the internet?
Yeah, totally. I mean, fun enough, well, let's start at where we are now. Music is devalued to such a point that we're no longer worried about
leaking
stuff.
Yeah,
and that's. I mean, that's a peculiar thing. It's a bit. I mean, I was talking to my manager this week about it, and I think it's starting to get to a point within the industry now where, okay, so I'll record a record, and I'll get a couple of club mixes done, and then I'll pay the club promotion, and we'll do a mail out. We won't do a video yet. Some graphics, some social media, some blah blah blah. Even if we say, let's say we do a £2,000 video. I did a rough calculation for a single to have a half, put the bare minimum. It's about £8,000. Mm-hmm. Okay. The maths is not working anymore. It's like, well, I have got to sell a lot of units now to make that back. And the way it's palmed off now is that, well, okay, well that is advertising for your gigs, which is what it is these days. Yeah. Music's become an advert for you to monetize your live performances, and that is the tail wagging the dog. So that's really weird. We're in a really weird place. So the internet and everything, it's your friend now. So instead of finishing the track and nipping off down the pub, it's the Twitter, it's the Facebook, you're working the thing like crazy. It's a very different game to when we started, and I don't know.
Did it take you a while to sort of adjust to that? We totally didn't adjust to it. That was the problem. We pushed against this podcasting and our tracks going on. No, we don't want any of this. And it did take us 2 years to sort of go, hold on a second, we've got this all wrong,
Yes, I'm probably the same. I sort of reluctantly kind of bought into it in the end and understood what was going on. I mean, I think when I say reluctantly, because I think I was lost for words. It's the idea. I still have a problem with it. Music is it's no different to it's a product. It's the same as a car or Head and Shoulders, whether it was Steve Jobs or whoever it was that came along, and we just devalued it, just totally devalued it, and everything just became.
But Nick, I mean, I suppose the counter to that was, for years we were paying, $12.99 for a CD. That was vastly overpriced. Genuinely, we were not getting the lion's share of the money. There was people between us and the fans that were taken just creaming off the top. And then in 2000 stuff, you were getting albums, the one or two good hits, and the music industry made you buy 8 tracks that you didn't want. So it's become a bit more democratized, hasn't it? And a bit more sort of. I'm struggling with the album format at the moment. I'm going, is it a thing still? How do you feel about the album format?
Oh no, that's quite interesting. yes, it is. I mean, I've always been of that thing. Not trying to bring the album back. Oh, it's like, like the good old days. Not like that at all. Uh, I didn't like the attitude pervade about cherry picking and all that sort of thing that we have. And funnily enough, um, Spotify has come along. Now, this is a very interesting one, and it's dividing opinions wildly. Now, there's a huge debate about what's being paid, whether it's being paid properly. But what is obvious is that what's happening there is musically healthy because it's not about cherry picking. It's about a list. It's about the running order, and it's about listening, and it's about how it plays,
Mm-hmm.
and that works very well for me. And I do very well with Spotify because that's part of one of my USPs.
Yeah, yeah.
Crikey, the new album is called "The Whole Is Greater Than the Sum of Its Parts."
Mm-hmm.
That is basically big flag saying, don't just listen to track 10, listen to the whole thing, and as a body of work, it turns into something different, and that's kind of interesting what's happening there. Now, I mean, the Spotify thing's kind of crazy because I
Can
think
can I ask you a question? Who do you believe on the Spotify Taylor Swift side of the argument?
Well, let me explain something here, and I think it's very important that it gets explained. As a record company, which I am,
Mm-hmm.
the record company share from Spotify is generous.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're an artist like Taylor, signed as an artist to a big major, your artist share from Spotify is not very good at all.
Well, I think this is the crux of the argument, and I think that Spotify have lost the message in that the record companies are not as transparent, but the artists who are going out and saying, "Well, I'm receiving, for $1,000 for 1 million plays," uh, that's what they're getting. But there's a discrepancy between Spotify and the record companies.
I think I think the problem is that the record companies are not passing it on properly. I think actually that's where it's at, and the gun is being pointed at Spotify, and I'm not sure that's the whole truth here.
Yeah.
Because as I'm an artist and I run my own record company, and I do fine with Spotify, and they are giving iTunes an absolute pasting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be very interesting to see how that all pans out.
Yeah. No, I agree. I just wish Spotify could get the message out. I think, the Taylor Swift thing has been a distraction, and they are. I think they're genuine in that they are for the artist, and they're going to try and monetize this as much as they can. And so, yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. We've kind of gone into the whole ethos of the business side of things and stuff. Let's get back to some more nuts and bolts about production and what you actually use. I think some of the viewers really want to know, how does Nick get that sound? What is over your master channel?
There's an SSL compressor, multimeter, some channel EQ, but I don't.
Are you Waves, UAD? Do you use?
I tend not to use any of those mastering plugins on the master, but that's a mistake.
Uh-huh.
Or even have it there and write with it on. That's a disaster, and I think people do that. That's a big no. Very little is the answer, Chris.
Right.
Actually, it's like people, do you stop the record and then do you mix it? I was like, well, of course I don't. Mm-hmm. Over the period of a month, it's mixed itself, apart from a few bits and bobs, because that's how it works with this software. It's great. You just tweak as you go along, or maybe people work in different ways, but I do not. In the old days, pull out all the faders and off we go. We're going to mix it. You'll ruin that whole month it's taken to get it to that place. So I'm quite old school in some of that, and I work with a mastering engineer I've worked with for years, and I tend not to do too much in my own studio. I tend to get it done proper in a proper mastering house.
Okay, and the the stuff that you're using, it's a common thing with a lot of the big producers. The theme that I always get from you and other even younger guys, the guy Island Bluestone, who I think just sounds great. It's layer, 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 and very little processing. There's just he says his kicks. He doesn't touch his kicks. He just has a little bit of EQ and that's it. Are you the same? Are you mad on effects? Or are you just very cautious of?
No, I'm not mad on effects. Uh, I'm not mad on effects at all. No, just a little, just the right amount here and there. They can easily, very quickly swamp things. Yeah, I think I spend a lot of time trying to get the sounds right.
Yeah, I think
Right.
isn't that key for every? I mean, think for every young producer is get the sound right at the start and don't try and EQ it that way or put distortions on it to try and get it. If you can get sound design right at the start and get everything to fit when you're writing, that helps everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. That is, I do it without thinking about it.
Yeah.
You see, but it does help that you need good sound sources as well, and you need good libraries, and you need where to find things and the right textures. It's just stuff that simply comes over time and knowledge, and that's how it works. You could probably throw it all away. I'd be heartbroken, but it's what's in here and how these work that make it right. It's really it's hard to say, but you know when something's wrong. You just like, or when you're trying something. I mean, I've got a song at the minute which we finished for the album, which is really really exciting, and it's a song which goes into a massive, big, huge dance thing. So it starts with a slightly acoustic kick, and there's guitars and there's layers, and it blending from that into a big dance record. It's just the knowledge of knowing how to do this. So those are awkward bedfellows. The closest thing I could say to it, it's not like that. The closest thing I'd say would be a bit like the song that Alesso and One Republic did together.
Okay, right.
It's a song, and it sounds, but you have to know how to get that. And it's a band. It's like a band playing, which then goes into a big dance moment. And but it just takes so much time and knowledge to know how to do it, and you know when that's wrong. It's like, okay, well is that kick drum right? Is that gonna sound odd because it's a live kick drum which is going to go into a full on house kick drum, and it's knowing when and where to do it, and it's trial and error, and
You've recently started DJing, probably not recently. I don't know, a couple of years, is it? You've actually. And has that fed into the productions you're talking about? Will this kick sound right? So is it starting to inform your production choices?
Yes and no. I've found DJing so refreshing and fun. I've probably started giving better mix-ins and outs on my records.
Finally,
little bit of appreciation to that problem. And obviously, there's some stuff on the new album which is very club led, and there are certain things, and I probably used to make my records a little woollier and thicker, and they'd be hard to play out. It'd be, it's like if you listen to the original Salt Water, it's just like a wall of sound.
Yeah.
It's sonically diabolical, because it's lovely to listen to, but take it to the gig, and it's just, oh, hang on a minute. And that's why records like Free by Alternate sound amazing, because there's nothing in it.
Yeah, and I think that's why this EDM sounds amazing in festival and stuff, because there's nothing. There's just that big hard kick and the off bass, and everything's compartmentalized into sort of
Yeah.
their sections, whereas we did these big expansive sounds that's washed over you, and
Yeah.
over club speakers just failed. You're doing a thing, transets. Talk us through that. What's
Am
sorry, sunsets.
Oh, sunsets. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's an exciting thing that's happened. I mean, it's about a year old, and actually, that is something that came about from DJing, and actually should have done it maybe 10 years ago. Sunsets is basically it's my radio show, and it is a radio show, and not just a podcast. It's syndicated to 40 different radio stations around the world at the minute, and it does huge amounts. I was really shocked. We went to number one the first 2 or 3 episodes. I was really shocked how well it got received. Now, it was born out of, we were going to do a Chicane club night.
Mm-hmm.
Armin does his thing. Ferry does his own stuff. We were going to do our own night, and I just couldn't justify or come up with the uniqueness of just a Chicane night. I was like, and when I stopped and thought about what it was that is synonymous and unique about me, is that I have one foot firmly in big dance anthems and the other foot in chill out, Balearic, beautiful, epic stuff. Okay, so that's what I do. So, and then it was like, well, actually, it's a bit like a Cafe Del Mar sunset or a Mambo sunset. You play beautiful records down, and then off we go into the night. So the show is basically encompasses that. So it starts off, and I'll scour the planet for the best and most beautiful, epic, Balearic stuff. Beautiful music, and then we'll ramp it up, and then by the end of the show, it's banging, and it's going to become quite a big thing. Maybe we're possibly going to be doing the show, hopefully, on a big radio station, big proper, terrestrial radio station. We don't know where, but it's growing and growing and growing. It's getting very exciting. It's going to be a live experience. So.
And a few Cafe Mambo sets next summer and stuff.
Yeah. I didn't get to do one this year, but I did one last year where I played the sun. It's very rare to be allowed to play the sundown.
Yeah,
people play after, but I got invited to actually play the sundown, which is it's only two of the people who've ever done it.
Right.
Ever,
Okay.
in the entire history of the whole thing. One of them's Dave Seaman, and one someone else. I can't remember. So I did that, and then. Then I ramped it up, and then Norman Cook came on after me, and we had the biggest night they had down there last year. It was crazy, really crazy. It's actually a live concept. You don't have to be at the beach. The idea. I've done one sunset show, and it was at a supper club. I don't know if you're familiar with supper clubs.
Yes, yeah.
So while everyone was eating, I played the beautiful music, and then we ramped it up, and then we banged it off, and then night went crazy. So it's like a sort of experience. So we're doing some compilation CDs. So yeah, it's a kind of Chicane Mark II, really. It's a very interesting thing that I'm doing, as well as the Chicane albums. It's gone so well. We're really excited about it.
It seems like you're actually really enjoying being Chicane at the moment. It seems like you're very comfortable and happy.
I mean, I can think of quite a few times where I haven't, or where I've been disenchanted with dance music, and just wanted to do something different. As an artist, you know this. You're not always on top of your game, or you're just not in that place. And right now, I'm very excited about some of the stuff. Done some couple of amazing tracks with Lisa Gerrard, she's the voice of the Gladiator soundtrack.
Okay.
My God, she's the one and only. She's phenomenal.
Right.
So I've done some great tracks with her. Great tracks with a fellow called Paul Aiden.
Paul.
And we've just done this amazing track called Oxygen together. It's really exciting. It's going to be a single. I'm good, Chris. Life could be worse.
That's good. Do you know what? I'm actually really glad to hear that after everything you've been through in the sort of the long 15-year career, that you can still sort of be sitting in a studio and go, do you know what? This is kind of nice, this is good, and be excited and be energized about projects coming up and in the future. Nick, I just wanted to thank you so much. I've really enjoyed having a chat to you. We actually don't get to chat enough.
No.
Something I'd love to do more, because our journeys are very parallel. And thank you very much for joining us on Sonic Academy. And
Been a blast.
and hope the album goes well. It's dropping at the end of January.
End of January, yeah, 28th of January, I believe.
Nick, thank you very much from Sonic Academy, guys. Hope you all got something from it, and we'll see you all very, very soon.
Cheers, Chris.